My name is Olivia Campbell Andersen, as introduced, and I lead Renewable Energy Vermont. For folks that aren't familiar with REV, as folks know us, we represent the clean energy companies in the state, nonprofits and utilities and individuals that are committed to eliminating our reliance on dirty fossil fuels by increasing renewable energy and energy efficiency in Vermont. And to get a sense of, it might be helpful too, we have a small group here, but to help get a sense of what brings you here and what your interest might be, are there folks who, does everyone here live in Vermont or call Vermont home? Okay, some visiting students. Did I see a? Okay. And folks are all your electric utility provider, local in the area, Green Mountain Power? Does anyone have a different provider? Okay. And is there anyone here who already has solar on their house or on their business? Okay. Well, plenty of opportunity. So to give a sense of Vermont's clean energy economy, I mentioned that we focus on achieving total renewable electricity and energy. One of the ways that Vermont is a little bit different, or our commitments to renewable energy are more comprehensive than some other jurisdictions, is that when we talk about energy, you might have heard of 90% by 2050. We're now starting to talk about 100% renewable electricity by 2030 as our goals. But we talk about energy in the forms of electricity, heating, and transportation. Total energy, because we think it's possible and today, and even it'll be even easier in the future to have total renewable energy for our homes and businesses. So to get a sense of the clean energy economy in Vermont, folks who work in the sector represent about 6% of the state's workforce. So it's a major component of the sector, of the state's economy. Most of those jobs, over 10,000 jobs, are in energy efficiency. Solar is the second highest in employing full-time employees, just over 1,500, but full and part-time or some component of their job, just about 2,000. Woody biomass, this includes forestry and advanced wood heating, transportation, energy storage, wind and hydro. As you can see, most of the companies in the state of Vermont have 5 employees or fewer that provide services in the clean energy sector. And we do have a website that features some of the workers, and we're adding more stories every day, but I find that it's helpful to get a sense of who folks are, in addition to what are, the shiny technologies are as well, to tell the whole story of the benefits of renewable energy. And so feel free to visit workingvermonters.org to learn more about some of the folks who are working in the sector here in Vermont. One of the reasons that I am so excited about solar is not just because of the benefits that it brings to our environment, but it also brings tremendous resiliency and cost savings as we are experiencing climate change now. And so a lot of folks may not realize that weather events in Vermont today that are increasing in intensity are increasing our electricity costs. And solar is one of the solutions that helps improve our resiliency to address some of those issues. So since the year 2000, Vermont suffered about on average 2 federally declared weather disaster events every year. And this is causing increased costs in terms of electricity, with Green Mountain Power spending more than $34 million on responding to storm events, repairing those poles and wires, et cetera, an average of $8 million a year. Washington Electric Co-op actually went into the red last year, well, in 2017, because of a single storm, caused them to have an operating loss. And what we know is that, how does solar fit into this, right? So what we know is that when we generate more of our electricity locally, it creates greater resilience, and we can create situations that reduce these costs both in the short term and the long term. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Do folks have a sense, if anyone were to guess how much of New England, how much of our electricity comes from renewables? Does anyone have an idea? 6%, pretty close. Any other ideas? Yeah, well, it's it's a little bit more than that, but you get the point that we have a lot of progress to make. So Vermont is connected. We're not, when it comes to electricity, we rely on the regional grid that's called ISO New England. And and we also are we are always, more than 86% of the time, we are importing electricity from outside of the state of Vermont to keep our lights on. And so the region as a grid, our regional grid, is largely comprised getting our electricity from natural gas, 49%, nuclear, 30%, renewables, 10%. I will also say that this is a very generous definition of renewable energy that includes waste to energy, burning of refuse and things like that, that's in some other states. Hydro was this run-of-the-river hydro, coal, and also some quite a bit from Hydro-Quebec. The good news is that coal and oil are increasingly decreasing, but they're really been replaced with natural gas. What we'd like to do is obviously increase that percentage both in the region and in Vermont significantly.
Olivia,
yeah.
If you add that up, that's 100%. So where's solar?
So solar falls within the renewable category. So Vermont is getting somewhere in the range of between 5 and 8% of our electricity from solar. It's a little bit difficult to track, as utilities sometimes sell the renewable energy credits that are associated with solar. So that's why I provide a range rather than a straight number.
And I just have one more question. Why do you not include hydro as renewable?
So this is, I consider hydro renewable. So this chart was created by ISO New England, and they break out hydro separately. The different states, each state law determines what the state is considered renewable, and some states have a renewable electricity portfolio, meaning, or in the state of Vermont, we call it renewable energy standard, meaning that the state law has required that utilities procure so much of their electricity from renewables. And each state defines what's renewable a little bit differently, and some states don't consider hydro renewable based on the vintage year. I didn't make the chart, comes from ISO New England, but I would consider renewables to be hydro and others like wind, solar. So when we think about Vermont, I talked a little bit about our energy. We're being an energy exporter. We spend over $3 billion annually on energy. This is electricity and heating and transportation. But having local solar keeps that income at much more at home by generating our own power. 90% of our total energy is imported from out of state, and much of our energy that we use for heating and almost all of our energy for heating and transportation is out of the country if you're using oil and gas. Large majority of our electricity, again, is imported. So this chart comes from the Energy Action Network. I've mentioned how we are importing, in terms of our volume of electricity, more than 60% from the rest of New England and also from Canada, mostly Hydro-Quebec. And we really have an inadequate level of local renewable electricity. You can see Vermont's electricity sources here. This is calculated out in BTUs, but the top sources of the electricity are non-renewable, nuclear, biomass, which is burning wood for electricity. We have 2 biomass facilities in the state that burn wood for electricity. They're not very efficient, but we have them. You can see Hydro-Quebec, other hydro, wind, solar, landfill methane, and farm methane, otherwise known as cow power. Wind and solar total are about 12% of our electric generation. And to get to just 20%, if we want to get to 20% of our electricity coming from solar, we need to install about 1,000 more megawatts. So this kind of gives you a sense of Vermont's current renewable energy standard, where we have here that Hydro-Quebec is in 2017 providing about 48% of our electricity. Other hydro, 47%, landfill methane, and wind and solar are a smaller percentage by what's required under our state law. So Vermont state law requires that all of our utilities procure renewable electricity. 75% of that has to be considered renewable by 2032. And right now we are about 55%. Green Mountain Power is over 55% renewable. And they are that renewability is mostly coming from purchasing RECs or energy from Hydro-Quebec. So what we want to do is, one of the good things about going solar in Vermont is you're a homeowner of your local business. If you go solar, and whether you keep those renewable energy credits for yourself, or if you give them to a utility and the utility uses them to meet the state requirement for the renewable electricity standard, the utility cannot sell the solar from net metering. They cannot sell those RECs. So it actually is required, that's something that we put forth in the new net metering rule, that energy has to stay here and the credit for that energy has to stay here, rather than trading it off and subsidizing additional natural gas generation and usage in the other New England states. So net metering is the tool that enables, if you were to go solar on your home or business, that's essentially literally runs your meter backwards when solar panels are generating electricity. And so how it works is you have solar panels and they convert that to electricity. Your home is connected to the grid, and there's a bidirectional two-way meter that gives you credit. It measures the energy that you use, and then if you produce any excess electricity, then you get a credit on your bill. And that automatically goes out to your neighbors. Sometimes you may produce more electricity than you need at that moment, and the utility uses that to power the grid for your neighbors. Other times you might pull from the grid if your panels aren't generating for, if you're having weather or if you have snow on top of them. But net metering is really the legal tool that allows Vermonters to generate their own electricity and share what they don't use with their neighbors through the grid. We are in Vermont as sort of net metering 3.0. The regulations have become a lot more complicated than they were originally. And so the amount of credit that you get on your electricity bill is based on whichever is lower, either your utility's electric rate or the statewide average blended residential rate, which is just over 15 cents. So right now, folks would be getting the statewide, if you're in Green Mountain Power territory, your base rate for what you get credit for if you're generating electricity is the statewide blended residential rate. So you can't use your net metering credits to pay for some charges like your customer charge from your utility. That's kind of like what it costs for administering the account, processing billing. You can't, you still have to pay for your energy efficiency charge, because even if you do have solar, you're benefiting from the projects and incentives that Efficiency Vermont may offer to customers, like money on light bulbs or cold climate heat pumps or other building insulation and so forth. And there's an energy assistance program charge and anything on-bill financing if you have any special arrangements, like if you leased a heat pump from Green Mountain Power or something like that. You can't use your net metering credits to pay for those things. So that typically adds up to about $25 to $27 of the average residential customer bill. But the rest of your bill, if you're generating, you would have no cost for your electricity. The solar would knock off those costs as your meter runs backwards. And in Vermont, we have, they've divided out the compensation based on the project size and the project location, and whether or not you hold on to the renewable energy credits. So if you're a homeowner, you would get, most homes are less than 15 kilowatts, unless you have a very large home, it's entirely powered with heat pumps, and you have probably 2 electric vehicles. In that case, you might need more than 15 kilowatts, but most homes getting installed today are in the 5 to 8 or 9 kilowatt range. And that's considered residential solar. So you would be compensated for 10 years what's referred to as an adder. So the base rate plus 1 cent. And then if you give your renewable energy credits to the utility, starting July 1, it would be another plus 1 cent as an incentive. So instead of, for 10 years, you would receive just about 17.5 cents or whatever is the base electric rate plus 2 cents on top of that as compensation for the solar power that you generate to your customers, on your house. You can never cash out those credits, but they roll over, so you have an entire year to use them. Let's see. Yeah, I already covered the non-bypassable charges. We also have, for communities and for businesses that might need more electricity, the compensation rate and where it can be and if it can be located and built is determined on if you're on a preferred location. And this was really designed to address some land use issues around siting of solar, and also address the fact and create a way to encourage solar to be developed in environmentally impaired or already built locations. because oftentimes it's more complicated and more expensive to build solar on those sites. For example, if you were to build solar on top of a landfill or on a Superfund, a brownfield site, there are a lot of environmental mitigations and increased insurance and increased costs of doing that project. So in recognizing that, the Public Utility Commission said, yeah, those projects should be receiving some additional bill credits to compensate for those costs. And we also, as a way to encourage projects to go more in those environmentally impaired or existing developed sites rather than be a field. And so large projects that, if you're over 150 kilowatts, so if you're in the 150 kilowatts to 500 kilowatt range, you have to be located on a preferred site. And these are the different types of preferred sites that I mentioned. There's also an opportunity, if you participate in your town's energy committee, if you're on a select board, for someone to come forward and say, I have a piece of property, I think it would be good for a solar site. Town, planning commission, select board, regional planning commission, do you think this site is suitable for development? So before I go on, are there any questions about how net metering works? Okay. So again, why is net metering so important? Local renewables via net metering is really the only real opportunity that you have as a Vermonter to choose where you get your electricity and power from. It keeps the electricity dollars in our state, creating local jobs, sustaining the economy, and it allows Vermonters to, when they think about their electricity, do their part to mitigate climate issues. Some folks may see, when I talk about the economic benefits, these statistics are based on a 500 kilowatt system. So when you may have seen projects afield or projects, 500 kilowatts often is the amount of electricity that a larger school would need, like a high school. Harwood High School probably would need about that much electricity to power their facility to get a sense of scale and size. And when you have a project like that, it ends up supporting about 11 full-time jobs. It invests over $700,000 in the local labor force, and the typical school would save about $500,000 over the solar array's life. So most solar projects, the manufacturers of panels now come with a 20-year warranty. I've seen warranties that are 25 years, and we've received information that there's most of these facilities will last 30 years, just based on field testing and so forth. So that local investment in net metering generates a lot of economic activity, and brings also a lot of money into the state in terms of investments. And these figures are just for one 500 kilowatt solar project. We contracted with an economic analysis firm, Synapse, to do an assessment on what were the benefits of net metering that had taken place in Green Mountain Power's territory to date. This is they did this study in 2018, early 2018. And one of the other benefits is that whenever we're generating our electricity locally, we don't have to pay ISO New England charges for transmission and for capacity from bringing all that electricity in from out of the state. And so in 2016, for every kilowatt of net metering that was installed in the state, every other ratepayer, regardless if they went solar or not, actually saved 6 cents on their bill. because it lowered our regional capacity and transmission charges. So there's a real financial reason for supporting net metering and solar in Vermont, even if you decide that's not the right choice. You know, you don't have, for some reason, it doesn't work for you on your home or on your business, but the fact that you're benefiting by the fact that other people, your neighbors, are making those investments. And so in terms of adding all of those up of what we have installed to date in Green Mountain Power's territory, that's added just in salaries alone over the years, over $22 million to the local economy. If they did an assessment to quantify the health benefits, so if we're offsetting that oil, gas, and coal that would be generated in ISO New England, lowering pollution, particulate matter, and other health benefits from air pollution that solar doesn't create, that's $1 million a year of benefit. I talked about the utility benefits, and then there's also benefits to the community in terms of what solar projects themselves pay in terms of taxes, just under $2 million a year in state taxes in Green Mountain Power's territory alone. Now, what if we were to do even more? There was a study that was done by Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, funded by the U.S. Department of Energy, to see if we achieved 20% of our electricity from solar by 2030, what would those benefits be? What would be the costs in terms of the investment in the equipment and the infrastructure, and what would be the short and the long-term benefits? So they ran some very complex models and calculated out that we would have $8 billion in net benefits, meaning that once you take out the costs of the actual installation and everything, the benefits that the state would see would be tremendous. And so this is one of the many reasons. You can look at that study in more depth at VEIC's website, or if you just Google Vermont solar pathways, they did an analysis that is quite compelling in terms of the statewide benefits for increasing solar in Vermont. A lot of questions I always get too is concern about how much land does that take up? How much, what do you need? But if we were to have about over 20% of our electricity coming from solar, it would be a very small portion of the land in the state of Vermont. That's about the size of Montpelier. Some people could insert their own joke about the political jokes with the State House, but I won't do that here. So it really, even though we see it a lot more now, I really do think that with solar, it will become part of the background, just like electrical lines, just like telephone lines, that oftentimes we don't really even notice them anymore because they're just there and part of our scenery. I think with solar, there's been concerns about aesthetics and people not wanting to see it, but I think that is, as we get more used to it, and I personally, when I see that, or when I have friends visiting Vermont from other states, it's really a source of pride, because one thing is too, when you do see it, you think, oh, we're doing something and it's possible, and look at what we have done. And I think when we have so many folks that visit our state from all over the world, the fact that they see it, I have friends that come in and they're like, there's solar everywhere. And I'm like, yeah? And they're like, that's amazing, because it's just not, it's not as prolific in other areas. But really, it's the net metering policy that's made that possible in the state of Vermont. So how are we doing when it comes to other states? Some folks, sometimes you might hear like, okay, I think we have enough now. It sounds like the folks that are here realize that we have more progress to go. But when we talk about solar penetration or how much solar that we have installed, it's important to compare the amount of capacity that's being generated to the amount of electricity that's being used. Not to compare it to our peak demand, meaning our highest electricity use, but really, or how much has been installed to, because it's really about how much are you generating and how much are you generating in terms of the electricity that you're using. And so you can see that, how do we compare to some other leading solar states, California, Hawaii, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, North Carolina even. That's largely due to utility projects, are all generating more solar electricity than Vermont is. And Massachusetts has a new program. I think Massachusetts is going to be taking us up soon, because they are recognizing the benefits that Vermont has received in our early energy efficiency work with Efficiency Vermont, and also with solar in terms of reducing our electricity costs. That's why Vermont has the second lowest electricity costs in the New England region, because of the good work that we've done to become more efficient and also more reliance on renewables.
Olivia, so I see 10 states represented there. So can we take from this that the other 40 states have less than 4%? Or is this just you're not adding everybody in who has 5, 10%?
Yeah, so this is actually more a reflection of the top states. So I didn't do a full comparison. What I did here was look at who do we know are the top states. I think, actually I think New York would be lower here. But Vermont is certainly amongst the top 10 states.
Can I ask this question now, just because I saw this on 60 Minutes? In Hawaii, they're pushing for the houses to be totally self-sufficient.
Yeah.
The Tesla batteries.
Yeah.
How does that play out in terms of your net metering? Because they want these houses to be totally off the grid.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that, because there's a new opportunity in terms of innovations with solar and pairing it with battery storage. So let me, and how are we, So let me, so where we do, what we are seeing though is that new solar deployment in the state of Vermont is slowing down. There have been a lot of changes to those net metering regulations that make it a little more challenging, a lot more challenging on the permitting side, particularly for community solar projects. And that compensation rate has decreased over time. But it still works out really well for residents. But we have seen about a 31% drop of new solar project applications in the state over the last year since the Public Utility Commission changed the net metering rules. Let's talk about innovations in solar. The one thing that I hope that you'll be seeing more of around the state is solar parking lot canopies. I know that there are 2 in Waitsfield. There is a historic one behind McClay Architects, but there's an inn just off the road that has a new, this is actually one of the first installed solar parking lot canopies that uses bifacial solar panels. So it has panels underneath and panels on top. And so it's generating electricity also based on the snow that's reflecting off the ground, bouncing up below. So it's very efficient in terms of, and the new engineering and the pricing has come down so that this is more of a viable solution in Vermont. Given the amount of snow that we receive, it's really important for these structures to be strong and be designed to handle that snow. And we didn't really have many parking lot canopies before because of that engineering challenge, and also the advances in this bifacial solar panel technology have really just come out to the market, and the prices have come down to make it viable. So this is parking lot canopy. What's even better is when you can charge in your electric vehicle, and it can use the solar that's getting generated right there to drive on sunshine as well. So we're hoping to see more of these. One of the things we are asking the Public Utility Commission to do is make the permitting a little bit easier, given that these are on existing parking areas or on driveways. Right now, you would have to go through permitting to say that there's no agricultural soils, to say that it's not a wetland, and all of that can be a little bit costly, particularly for larger projects. So we're trying to streamline the permitting to make it easier to have larger parking lot areas, parking lot canopies. So you'll see if you get up to Burlington, really excited that just earlier this year, the first commercial solar parking lot canopy was installed at the Echo Center in Burlington, right on the waterfront. So that's something to go see. And also the Alchemist in Stowe now has just commissioned about a month ago, up and running, parking lot canopy as well. And these were, we have a couple different companies in Vermont that are installing this. This one is from Suncommon, but it's exciting to see this innovation in play, particularly as we think about moving forward with renewable transportation solutions. We're also have been encouraging all of our members to think about how our solar projects can benefit, provide other environmental benefits. One of those is pollinator habitats. We don't, in Vermont, we don't do, almost all of our projects have grass underneath or native grass cover. And we partnered with Be the Change, which is a nonprofit out of Middlebury, and the University of Vermont to launch, pollinator-friendly solar pledge, where existing solar projects and new solar projects commit to planting and maintaining a specific seed mix that creates pollinator habitat. Because in Vermont, we actually have 9 species of rare and endangered bees. A lot of our native bees are really struggling, and so this is another way where solar can help. There have been some studies that show with these types of plantings, you're actually improving the soil underneath. So when the solar panels are gone, perhaps after 30 years, that actually, I like to think of it in some ways as conserving the land. So we're using the land to generate solar, and if it has pollinator-friendly solar plantings underneath, they're providing habitat for pollinators, and then when the solar is gone after if it's served its time there, you're going to have better soil than when it came. So that's part of our innovation with pollinator-friendly solar. The next thing is renewable energy storage. So the technology for energy storage has advanced significantly so that it works well for all levels, for residences, for commercial and school buildings, and for power quality control and other benefits for manufacturing. So the benefits of renewable energy storage, a lot of times you see here, this is that's one of our members standing next to a battery, home battery by Sonnen. It gets grid reliability, so it's really peace of mind. When you can say there's no need for home diesel generators anymore if the power goes out. You can rely on battery storage to keep the lights on, and you can also now rely on it for reducing electricity costs and managing your power quality and timing of it. So we have, there are times when the electricity is called peak, meaning that we're all using the most electricity that's needed. And those peak periods are often when our utility is pulling the most electricity off of the regional grid, which is not as clean. That's the dirtiest times as well. And so what the nice thing about energy storage is the technology has advanced to the point where the utility can know, they get a signal from ISO New England, and they're like, we're having a peak time. That means that using electricity during this time is the most expensive time to use electricity. And what the utility will do then, or a different private company, but right now what Green Mountain Power is doing is they can tap into that battery and use it for either your own home or on the grid. And that reduces costs for everyone. And then when that's not necessary, that may happen 3 to 5 times a month as they're trying to reduce those peak periods. But it also is great for backup power when your electricity goes out. And we're seeing more and more of those events, and that it's being out for longer. So if you may become the most popular neighbor in town if you have solar plus battery storage backup, because everyone will come over to your house to take a shower. But it also creates a way for us to maximize the renewable energy that we have. So as we install more solar in the state of Vermont, when that's generating electricity does not always match up with when we need the electricity. So often our peak times of needing electricity now in Vermont, because of the amount of solar that we have installed, is in the evening time periods like 7 to 9, 10 p.m. And by essentially batteries help us shift that solar to those evening time periods, so we can rely less on the regional electricity, but also reduce our costs and really maximize the benefits of our local renewable electricity as well.
And can you explain what happened? Because I put my name in for the Green Mountain Power for those batteries.
Oh, good.
And they said the program died, or they didn't get the batteries they wanted.
So there are a couple different options right now. There is a new program. Let me explain it for folks that don't know about it yet. I'm glad you're excited about it, called Bring Your Own Device. And this was where Green Mountain Power customers can receive between $850 to up to $8,500 to help you pay for the costs of installing battery storage in your home or business. And there are also, you can bring your own battery storage, you can bring your own electric vehicle charger and hot water heater to sign up, and you can get a variety of different bill credits depending on the type, the amount of control you let them utilize. And so there are two options. Green Mountain Power is owning and then leasing to you the Tesla Powerwall. But you could also, if you want to own it yourself and have more control over it, and if you already have solar, you can, and you tie that battery storage system to solar, you can utilize the 30% federal tax credit right now to further reduce the cost of both your solar and the battery storage. So there are a variety of different systems. There's the Powerwall, there's Sonnen, there's an LG Solar Edge product, and there's a Pika is coming online. So you have a lot of different choices in the actual battery product. Green Mountain Power is only offering Tesla and Powerwalls. They are waiting on approval from the Public Utility Commission. There were concerns about the pricing and the competitive nature of a utility providing a service where there are existing local businesses that provide the same product and service in the market. And so I expect, one, the bring your own device is fully open right now. So you can go onto REV's website or through Green Mountain Power's website and find any local company that can work with you and run through what your options and choices are. Important to know that you have choices. And the pilot program, Green Mountain Power needs to file a tariff to get approval from the Public Utility Commission for continuing to sell more Powerwalls. So right now they need to get that permission to make sure that the pricing is right and fair. It's just part of the regulatory process. But you still can sign up through the BYOD. Right now there's no limits if you go through local Vermont business. And get those credits from on your bill or rebate from Green Mountain Power. So did you have another question about it?
You pretty much answered it.
Okay. So this is something that we worked really hard on because, as I mentioned, all those benefits of battery storage, and this is a first in the nation. There's no other, this is really actually quite innovative for Vermont and Vermont's utility to be offering this. It's the most generous amount to go back to customers, but that also speaks to the value that storage can provide to our grid and reducing our electricity costs. So maybe I just stop and see what other questions there are here. There's been quite a bit of activity in other states to propel renewable electricity. This is a slide showing some things that are going on in other states. But any other questions that I can answer for folks?
I've heard about solar energy storage, like communal. I'm in a very urban context, and I'm curious if that would work in a more rural space of sharing battery.
Yeah, so you're talking about what essentially are referred to as microgrids, where there are two very well-known projects where there's one out in Arizona, there's also one in New York City, where they are pooled together and created a microgrid using the local solar paired with storage, and multiple houses or multiple apartments were connected together, and they could take this entire community or the entire building off the grid entirely. And so we actually do have a mobile home or net zero home, modular home community called McKnight Lane in Vermont that it's net zero modular homes that were built by Vermont, designed and built by Vermont, that have solar and all have Sonnen batteries within each home. And it has the capacity to do that. So really, this is the future. We're gonna see a future where every new home really should have solar on it and have a battery installed. Part of the pilot program that Green Mountain Power is looking to do is use the metering capability of the battery so instead of having a meter on your house, the battery has the capability to be the meter as well. And so it's like one less piece of equipment that we need to install. But the technology very much is here. There's an entire suburb community, Sonnen. Many of these actually have been designed and installed in Germany. And there is a housing development in Arizona where Sonnen has done that with batteries that are completely microgridded. Green Mountain Power, I know, has a long-term vision to create at least five microgrids within the next 5 to 10 years in Vermont. There are some very large utility scale batteries that have already been deployed. One of them is in Rutland, and it's combined with a large utility scale solar, so that when that area has an outage or if we have an emergency, they can microgrid that area off from the rest of the grid and it can keep operating. So it's really exciting. The technology's here. We're starting to install it in Vermont, and we definitely look forward to seeing more of it and making sure that it's not, one of the challenges I think is also making sure this is not just utilized in Green Mountain Power Territory, but also utilized in rural areas that can provide even greater benefit. Any other questions?
I have a question about disposal of solar panels. I'm curious about are there parts of them that are recycled? Are there parts of them that are just absolute waste? How does that happen?
So there is there's a national organization called SEIA, the Solar Industry Association, SEIA. And they have some information on their website about panel recycling. What we want to do, there's a lot of valuable material within the panels. I mentioned they last 30 years, up to 30 years, sometimes more. I think there are actually some solar hot water heaters that are older than that in Vermont installed, and still ticking. But after that time period, you know, there's metal and glass, and there are silicone and other materials. They need to be disposed of properly, but the industry is working on, has a set of standards in terms of disposal and recycling, because that's an important thing that you wouldn't, it would be quite, you don't want to take them to the dump. It would be wasteful because a lot of the components can be reused.
I would like to know about the technological advances in solar panels so that you don't have to have the sighting of these things directly into the sun. Are there new tiles and panels so that you can have them on other parts of your house that are maybe directed toward east, west, north, as opposed to south and west? Things like that?
Yeah, so you don't always have to have the panels directed toward the sun, but you're going to generate the most electricity if you do, because obviously the more sunlight that's hitting the panels or reflections of light, as I mentioned, those bifacial solar panels where they're top and bottom. There are 2 manufacturers of solar trackers in Vermont, All Earth Renewables in Williston and Solaflect in Norwich area, that literally follow the sun. And the capacity of those panels, they generate about 35 to 40% more electricity than panels that are not mobile. But even if you don't have, even if your home isn't facing the sun, light, but you do get sunlight on it, you can still be generating, you just won't generate as much. And so I don't know of any technologies that, it's not that you couldn't generate any, but you wouldn't, we would discourage, for example, if you had a very shady home, from installing on the backside where you have trees essentially providing shade. There are, Tesla was supposed to be coming out with a solar shingle, and that's not yet available in Vermont. Those tend to be, there have been other products that are like a solar shingle or a solar film. They tend to be pretty, not fairly expensive, not quite economical yet.
I have a question about cemeteries. Any thoughts about putting solar panels over cemeteries?
That's an interesting idea. No one's posed that to me before. So it's always up, would be up to the property owner as to what they would want to be doing. Any other questions that folks have?
But I don't know if you know it, as you go up to Middlesex, Route 100B or whatever, somebody has some, looks like solar panels that are reflectors that gravitate. Maybe they're not, maybe they're more.
You meaning they move?
Well, they seem to move, but they also have something in the middle that looks like they.
Parabolic.
Parabolic, yeah.
Parabolic by Lover's Lane in Moretown.
I don't,
But I thought that was radio and television
There's
signal.
satellites.
It's satellite, yeah.
There's satellites as you're going right
Right,
there in middle.
Right, that's not
Oh,
solar.
that's not solar?
oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was trying to picture it.
But it is.
Yeah, okay.
Not familiar with that.
Okay, good, thank you.
So there are, let me leave you at, there are some challenges ahead. You know, we are working with the legislature and the Public Utility Commission to request that, you know, they maintain the net metering program so it's accessible to everyone. And reduce the permitting burdens, particularly for those projects that are in already developed sites like the parking lot canopies. We also could be doing a lot more around energy storage. And so other states around us have required, either provided incentives from the state, their Clean Energy Development Fund, or incorporated energy storage into the efficiency programs, because it is another way in terms of managing your electricity when you use it, et cetera. That's particularly important for the commercial sector and the industrial sector of managing demand charges and when they need electricity. Interesting thing about storage you might not know is that Vermont is actually home to 3 manufacturers of energy storage and storage software. The Tesla Powerwall, the inverter components, were actually patented and made by Dynapower that's located in South Burlington, Vermont, and they now have their own product. We also have a company called Northern Reliability that has installed storage systems all over the world. So we're home to more innovation than is often visible to the public. But if you are looking for a resources, you can visit our website, revermont.org. And on that website, you can find companies that are REV members to install solar, install batteries, install cold climate heat pumps, advanced wood heating, get electric vehicles, get electric vehicle charging. We just updated our site in terms of how to find a vendor, and you can search by county and technology type. This is actually a snapshot of the old website. So as you can see, it's not as visually lovely. But the new website, you can actually say, I live in Washington County, and see where the vendors are. One thing I would recommend is always get more than one quote for good pricing, because there's a lot of different options when it comes to solar, types of panels, how you want the panels installed, where you want them installed. The same thing with batteries. So you do have more choices than sometimes folks often realize in terms of both of the product and the design and the installer. There's also another resource called from Energy Action Network called the Vermont Energy Dashboard, and you can go online and see, you know, who else has installed solar in the state. Here's stories about good community projects, and share what you've done around climate action and learn from others as well. So thank you guys for coming, and if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to hang out for a bit.
Thank you very much.
So I was in Italy a number of years ago, and all of the hot water heaters are on the roof in cities. Do we do that in this country at all?
So that's solar hot water is very popular. I would say it's not typically installed now because of the improvements in efficiency of standard hot water heaters and tankless hot water heaters. They have become so efficient, but there are a lot of off-grid systems. We have a lot of off-grid homes in Vermont that use solar hot water. If you're on the grid, today, I wouldn't, it's, if you're comparing the price of getting a solar hot water system with getting maybe a tankless hot water system or a really efficient hot water system that's electric, and then if you have solar with it, it doesn't necessarily make sense to install a whole solar hot water system itself.
And car roofs with solar on them, how's that going?
So the some cars that you see, or actually there are now electric buses that have solar roofs on the top. Those are not, most of that electricity is being used to power the air conditioning or the heat in the vehicle, not actually to propel the vehicle. Just based on the amount of electricity that's needed. But you are seeing them. I think that there are some versions of the Prius that had it, but that it's actually, it's running the AC or the heat. Well, have a great evening. Thank you.